What would God say about 12 rules for life? Well, we're going to look at the big problem that 12 rules for life raises and then the big solution that it offers, and just think, what would God say about each of those? So what's the big problem that 12 rules for life is all about? Well, it's this: meaning. How do I live a meaningful life? Right at the beginning of the book, Jordan Peterson says the soul of the individual eternally hungers for the heroism of genuine being, and willingness to take on that responsibility is identical to the decision to live a meaningful life. How do I live a meaningful life? I wonder if you've got a good answer to that question. You see, all of us hungers and longs and wants meaning. And the Bible would agree that that is a really big problem. There's a whole book in the Bible called Ecclesiastes that's all about this, the fact that we hunger and search for meaning, and often the things that we look to don't truly satisfy. That is the big problem, and the Bible would agree with that. Now, as part of that problem, Jordan Peterson says some really refreshing things. So typically these days, we're told that the answer is just to look inside ourselves. You look inside your own heart and you live out the desires you find in your heart, and then you will find true meaning. But Jordan Peterson points out the problem's a bit more complicated than that. I mean, as any one of us knows who's tried that, you can try living out your desires and you feel just as empty as ever. And Jordan Peterson points out that actually, as I look inside my heart, what I find there isn't all good, that there's chaos there as well as order. For example, he says, and in this quote, the snake is a symbol of chaos. The worst of all snakes is the eternal human proclivity for evil. It's psychological, spiritual, personal, and internal. Only you know the full range of your secret transgressions, insufficiencies, and inadequacies. No one's more familiar than you with the ways that your mind and body are flawed. I find it really refreshing for someone to admit this, that as I look inside, I find bad there as well as good. So in this problem, in this hunt for meaning, looking into my heart it's not that simple. I think Jesus would agree with that. The Bible says, Jesus says in Mark chapter 7, that it's not just what's outside of us, but what's inside us that makes us unclean. It's what comes out of our hearts that's part of the problem. So broadly speaking, I think the Bible would agree with the problem, that we long for meaning and that our hearts can be a bit of a mess. But what about the solution? This is where the Bible and Jordan Peterson might part ways a bit. The solution that Jordan Peterson gives basically is take responsibility. So from that quote in the beginning, taking on responsibilities identical to the decision to live a meaningful life. Or later he says we must accept as much responsibility as possible for individual life, society and the world. Take responsibility, and as you do that, as you live out these 12 rules that are all about taking responsibility, you'll find meaning. There's a lot to be said for that, but here's my problem with that. How will you ever know that you've taken enough responsibility, that you've reached meaningfulness? See, the danger of Jordan Peterson's solution is that you find yourself taking on more and more responsibility and you're never sure you've done enough. You're never at peace. Now, the Bible would disagree about the solution there. It would have another quite radical solution. So in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1, it says this: "Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and live a life of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us." Do you notice there that it all starts not with what we do, but with what Jesus has done for us, giving himself up out of love to take away our guilt and shame, and to make us dearly loved children of God. Now, that love is the water that can quench our thirst for meaning. It's in becoming a dearly loved child of God that a Christian finds true meaning and satisfying purpose. And from that place of meaning, do you see what happens? We live a life of love. That is, that we take on responsibility, it's in Jordan Peterson's terms, for loving our society and the world. But you notice here that we do that not to earn our meaning, but because we've already been given it. So this is a meaning, a purpose that can bear weight, that can bear my failures, that can bear my doubts and my questions, and that can provide what I need to head out and engage and take responsibility for others and for the world. So, what would God say to Jordan Peterson then? I think he'd agree that this problem of meaning is a huge, huge problem, and our hearts are part of that. But he would disagree that the answer is not just to try harder to take responsibility, but rather to receive God's love for you in Jesus, and from that position of meaning and security, to head out and start loving others. Now, if that raises questions for you, we're going to have a Q&A. So check out the Imperial College CU Facebook page for details of that in a couple of weeks' time. I'd love to see you there, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. Thanks very much.